And then I started learning about some rules of thumb. And they would say, well, typical marketing budget is this percent of gross. And, it can range, as you know, depending on if you hit a new market, you could be, I'm going to spend, I hate to even quote numbers, but, 14%.
5 to 15% or
right.
There's all those numbers that get thrown out. Yeah.
But most people can't really do that forever. I was so glad to find you, Alex, because, there's so many people out there hammering the HVAC industry because it's a fairly lucrative business. And so there's a bunch of people that market specifically to this industry.
Like as you grow and as you scale, I'm sure that there's just so many moving pieces and there's bound to be misses. There's bound to be bad experiences. It's just that rule of big numbers. I think sometimes it can be tough because, every time you're bringing someone on payroll, there's always considerations.
Sometimes it takes some courage. You can't hire a half of a person, right? People have to understand that profit's not bad. You have to have a couple of little mantras. A mantra is that money is for serving people. And so you can be all proud of the fact that you're not making any money or something, take it as a badge of honor, but how are you going to serve anybody if you're not making a profit? So profitability is really important.
You're listening to the HVAC Heroes podcast, a show that shares real stories of growth and success in order to inspire HVAC contractors to achieve optimal success in their own businesses. On this show, we talk with some of the top HVAC companies across the USA to unveil the strategies and decisions they have made to eventually become some of the most successful in the industry. I'm your host, Alex Van Leeuwen, the founder of HVAC Marketers, which is the digital marketing agency for HVAC businesses. On each episode, I sit down with industry leaders to talk about their processes, the lessons that they've learned along the way, and how you too can find success in your HVAC business.
Well, Mark, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast today. You're a guest I've been super excited to have on because I think you have a really interesting story. And, as I always say, the goal of this podcast is really for our audience of HVAC owners to be able to listen in and figure out what's working, get new ideas, and really help them grow their business. So I appreciate you being willing to come on here and share your story.
Yeah, same here. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. So why don't you just begin? I think our guests are always interested in kind of what's that snapshot. So tell us just a little bit about your company, Pico, and kind of size, scale. Give us the quick background for our listeners.
Yeah, so I guess are most of your the people that you work with, are they mostly in my size range? Are they big, small? How is it?
Good question. Yeah, good question. So for those that are listening, disclaimer, Mark is a client of HVAC Marketers and we work together. So typically our listeners are in that, they could be anywhere from trying to crack 1 million to 8 figures and beyond. So it really varies, but most of our listeners, I think, are going to be within that $1 to $5 million range.
Yeah. Well, good. Yeah. So, we started our business. We didn't buy the business. We started the business from scratch, out of desperation. I had a career in corporate America and, around 9/11 timeframe, became displaced. And then, we had some opportunities come up and took advantage of that kind of had a big project that we kind of worked on for a couple of years. And that was sort of like the on-ramp for us. Working on a factory, which is my background, working in manufacturing. And so we put a bunch of air conditioning on a factory renovation, and that kind of fed us for a couple of years, kind of limped along. Gotcha. And then we started migrating into the residential world. And it was just going out, handing out business cards, and it was kind of a slow start for about 5 years, And that's kind of, we didn't know anything. I'm an engineer, so I have I had knowledge of air conditioning from my previous work experience, but as far as running a business in this arena, that was all learning for me. So, we went from, handing out business cards to trying to figure out how do I market this to get bigger. And, anybody I'm talking to knows that, just because you have more people doesn't mean it gets easier, right? It's just the treadmill runs faster. So
that's a common theme that we hear on the show. Yeah,
that's right. So you got more people.
Yeah,
you need to have more phone calls to keep your people working. So
you've had a lot of success, and like today, kind of like, what's your size? How many trucks you run in? Like, if you don't mind sharing.
No, we have, I'd say our company's about, 15 people. And we bounce, off season, maybe a couple less or whatever. That's the total company. We have a handful of trucks. We got spare trucks. Maybe we have 12 or 15 trucks, and then maybe 4 of them are spares or something like that, Well, anyway, that's kind of how we run. And so as we grew, it got to the point where we just needed more and more phone calls and more leads to keep the team working.
So I definitely want to dive into that. Mark, I know you personally, like, you're very successful in this space and run a fantastic business. So I want to rewind, if we can, like back to the beginning. So you said you like really were on the commercial side is like really what the start of, you having your own business in the HVAC space. Like,
exactly.
How were you able to land just that first big job, like just going all the way back to like starting from scratch?
Yeah, that
takes you back a little
kind of a long story. I'll shorten it up, but I became unemployed because of,
right.
Around 9/11, a lot of things happened.
Yeah.
The planes hit the towers, and then people stopped spending money, and then there was some downsizing and things like that. And, I'd been in that position before because I'd been working in corporate for 20 years, but I had a lot of contacts. And so through my network, I got some leads on a job. And there was a company that was moving out of a giant building. And then there was a company that was going to be buying that building, and they needed air conditioning. And I was an engineer. And so I did some load calculations to figure out how much they needed. And turns out I ended up coordinating this whole job, sort of like a project manager, not like a company. Okay. Whereas I went out and hired a mechanical contractor. I coordinated all the work and then did all the billing and paid the. So I acted like kind of like I guess you would call it a project manager. I didn't even have a license yet, but the company that was doing the work I had worked with in the past. So we already had a relationship, and it was very easy for us to work together. And so we got the whole job done. It worked really good. And so it was big. So the money trickled in, and we just kind of struggled, for a few years to pay bills. We had a family. We were building a building. A lot of things happening at that time. So, excuse me 1 second.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry about that.
That's okay. That's the nature of the beast. It's totally fine. So very cool. So almost, is it fair to say you almost kind of like by happenstance, like found yourself in a position to where you could provide some value at this big commercial job, and your background in engineering, you started off there. And then, when was it that you decided, or like what pushed you into the residential side of things?
Well, the second part of that story is when we were actually starting, we put equipment on the roof of this factory, and then we, once it's there, we need to start it up and, do the startups and everything. So I hired a commercial company to do startups. And then lo and behold, somebody that I've been working with in the past, who was a technician, came walking into my office, and he told me that he'd been also out of work and he used up all his resources. And I said, why didn't you come talk to me sooner, But he became the guy that we started working with, because he was out of work, very experienced, very sharp technician. And so he started working on this large job. And when it came to the tail end of it, then we just started handing out business cards. And then he's running out of his own truck. And then in that process, we purchased the used van and then started buying tools. And this is just how it just kind of started going.
Yeah.
Like, and we hit all the rough spots along the way that everybody else probably already has experience,
Oh yeah. The shortcut
phone's not ringing.
Yeah.
Everybody needs money,
It turns out the shortcut is that there is no shortcut.
It's
those, you got to have those trying years. So
sweat it out. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was it? I mean, I know that the HVAC world's changed a lot, like rate of change just continues to increase every year. But
absolutely,
like during those, you mentioned like that kind of that first 5 years of like instability and just, hustling up business and trying to really get some stability. Like what were, I don't know, back then, like what were some things that worked for you, or it was just a matter of trying to figure out what worked?
Well, in the beginning, people say word of mouth is the best advertising. And I think that word of mouth is great, but, in the middle of the summer, you're out handing out business cards, the phone's ringing and everything, but you get to the shoulder seasons and then, air conditioning's not being used as much and the phone slows down. And then it's like, okay, now what do I do? How do I market? How do I get the phone to ring? And of course, you're at the same time, this may not be everybody's experience. I'm sure there's folks out there who have purchased businesses, people, maybe second generation people. Or I think a very common way people grow is they're working for another company and they're a technician and they say, I can do this on my own. And then they go out and they've got a truck and they're fixing the units, collecting the money, answering the phones while they're out in the field. That wasn't our experience. We had a technician and we had to keep him busy. So we had to work up the courage. Okay, what are we going to do? Let's figure out how to do some marketing. And then I'm trying to think of what the first marketing was that we did after handing, just door to door, making phone calls, letting people know. But I think we were a dealer for one of the big brands and started doing some of their co-op direct mail. Okay. And then at that time, when you're thinking about money, it's like, I remember $6,000 spent in a year was a lot of money.
Yeah.
When you're small, that's a lot of money.
No doubt. Yeah.
And then and as you're growing, you have to keep working and say, okay, well, next year I'm going to set a goal. I'm going to spend this much and I'm going to spend this much. I'm going to spend this much. And you work yourself up the ladder on your marketing budget.
Oh, that's very true. And keeping a forward view with that, like thinking in the future about what you're doing with marketing, because you've seen like nice stable growth over the course of your career and with your business. So you've done obviously a really good job at kind of forecasting, which can be a difficult thing to do. I mean, we've seen that in the last couple of years, like just how much this industry has changed and everything's more expensive and hesitant buyer. And how do you approach like growth planning as it relates to marketing, but also as it relates to hiring and all the other facets of your business?
Well, there was a point in my business, and I was going to put plugs in for specific people, and mention names and things, but I got to the point where I needed information. And so I was like really frustrated one time. We were stuck at a few $100,000. I can't remember the exact amount. And so I'm online looking through and I found somebody that could possibly consult because I had questions, how do I do this? How do I do that?
Yeah.
And so we got a little bit of advice. We got some consulting. We got with a profitability group. And then I started learning about some rules of thumb. And they would say, well, typical marketing budget is this % of gross. And, it can range, as you know, depending on if you hit a new market, you could be, I'm going to spend, I hate to even quote numbers, but,
5 to 15% or
right.
There's all those numbers that get thrown out. Yeah.
But most people can't really do that forever, so that's like entering a market budget. And then you settle in and what are those numbers? And so at least we said we should be able to get these results out of these percentages. And when we weren't, then we had to find out, well, my marketing people aren't really doing it. Right. I was so glad to find you, Alex, because, there's so many people out there hammering the HVAC industry because it's a fairly lucrative business. And so there's a bunch of people that market specifically to this industry.
Oh, I appreciate that. I'm glad, I don't intend for the podcast to be a plug for us, but I'm very gracious.
Yes.
Glad we've been a little part of your story. But you bring up a good point around like coaching and getting some tutelage. That's something that I discovered in my own business, like in the past 18 months, like finding a coaching group to be a part of and getting some of those rules of thumb where I hear from people that are way above me, like some of these rules of thumb, I'm like, oh my God, like that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
What you mentioned, the one around, think of committing to like a marketing budget in terms of like a percent of top line revenue. Are there any other things that come to mind that you were just like, you join this group and then you're like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense? That really helped you grow?
Not right offhand thinking about it, but it's really all in the details. You can hire people and you can put them in a truck and you can send calls to them and everything like that. But keeping people motivated, you got the human side of the business, you got the human side of your staff, and then you also have the human side of the customer. So you got the human element on the customer side. You're going out, you fix the air conditioner, you collect some money and you move on. But then as you're growing, you're like, how can I take this customer base and market more products to the same customer base? This is a common theme in a lot of industries. What you talk about, say it's a lot harder to get a new customer than it is to keep a customer.
Absolutely.
Wow them and then sell them additional products and services. So that was one of the things that we learned. And how do you do that? I mean, we could go on and on.
Yeah. How do you do that? Because this is a topic I'm really passionate about. We talk about this a lot.
The PMs, the service agreements, the constant contact, what methods are you using to market? And what we found out recently, since we're not in the size range, you might have some customers that are, like you said, 8 figures. Well, if you're in the 8-figure range, you're already into casting wide nets through radio, television, and things like that.
Yeah.
But we've always tried to focus more on the grassroots, wowing the customer, using some direct mail, and then the internet, text message, email, all these little things. If you can do them well, I think are really benefiting us.
Yeah, that makes
sense.
Versus
just hitting the market and say, okay, I'm going to go on television. I'm going to spend this much. I'm not saying television's bad.
Right.
But most of the companies I see on television or on radio are the companies that are maybe 75, 100, 125 people.
Yeah, I think it depends too on like what the makeup of your service area is like. That's going to play a big factor. And
yes, for sure.
And then it's like, how good a job are you doing of getting a high lifetime value for your that new customer that comes in the door. So if you're running a big TV, radio kind of what we would call it like top of the funnel awareness level marketing, just like, hey, I want Acme HVAC to be a household name. That's a sizable investment, and there's return on that, of course, if you do it the right way. If you're not retaining your customers, and I think you were alluding earlier to like, how do you keep reselling that existing customer base? And you've done a good job of, you starting an HVAC, but now you all offer multiple services. Maybe we can talk about that, and really becoming that home services company and not just the HVAC company. And boy, that must have been a transition for you to say, we're gonna add services, and we're gonna really be able to look at each customer as a higher lifetime value and not just their HVAC company.
No, that's right. We're fortunate to have some technicians that didn't mind doing, other trades, working in other trades, plumbing, electrical, until we had enough money to have dedicated people in these areas. But that's definitely offering multiple services is definitely a way to have a higher revenue per customer.
Yeah.
What is it that you had mentioned something else that I was about to make a comment on?
Sorry, I've got so many questions for you.
You've
got a lot of good stuff. We were talking about kind of that lifetime value, and I was going to come back and ask you. You really answered the question around kind of adding additional services, and sort of kind of what the beginning of that were. And you were saying that have a team that's able to kind of switch hit, if you will. And
Yeah.
that's kind of how you got started offering those other services.
Yeah, I guess there's good and bad things about what I'm about to say. I read a statistic somewhere, and maybe it's old, out of an old book somewhere, but they said that, it's rare for a company to own more than a certain percentage of the market. And anybody listening to this knows what I'm talking about, because, everybody loses customers. And everybody gets customers from other companies, either loses them to other companies or gets them from other companies. Like, you want to do the best job you can. You preach it to your guys.
Yeah.
You said, but inevitably someone's having a bad day or something happens, a mistake gets made, and we do our best. One of our philosophies is we never abandon a customer. And, so anything that happens, we're going to take care of it. But once a customer loses trust, inevitably, I'd love to meet the company owner who says, I've never lost a customer. It's not
doesn't exist. Yeah.
So, right. So during
yeah.
certain times a year, it's almost guaranteed that your phone's going to ring, right? Because either they don't have enough capacity to handle it and you're catching overflow,
right,
or somebody made a mistake and it's a good company and they call you up and say, so-and-so was out here and they did this and they did that and I'm unhappy and now I'm calling you. And so you go out and now they're your customer. And then, but guess what? It happens to us too,
right?
In the reverse direction,
Yeah,
I think that keeps the industry dynamic. It's not that someone can come in and they're going to own 100% of the business. So I guess this is a word of encouragement for anybody that's out there, saying that there's always opportunity.
Preach to him, Mark. I think that's very solid and very true. I experienced this yesterday. Actually, I got a little rental property that's about 15 minutes away, and I got a text from a tenant saying, Alex, it's 60 degrees in our unit. And I'm like, and so for context, it got down to close to 0 last night in Cincinnati. So I'm thinking, okay, this is an issue, right? So, I called some of the big names around Cincinnati, and a less than ideal experience. I have a little bit of inside baseball and know that these are solid companies, but I'm calling and, and this, one of them, it was an answering service, and, they're adamant that, well, we don't do commercial work. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. It's a boiler, it's residential equipment. It's I get it. But, and so, and with a little bit of inside baseball, I kind of knew what was going on. But that's just an example of what you were saying. It was like that everyone has a bad day. Like, as you grow and as you scale, I'm sure that, there's just so many moving pieces, and there's bound to be misses. There's bound to be bad experiences. It's just that rule of big numbers. So how, like, knowing that number never gets to 0, I guess it never gets to 100, right? You're never going to retain 100% of anyone that ever does work with, Pico is going to stay forever. But what are some things that you try to put in place, either like process or culturally, or it could be anything, but to try to minimize those and minimize the gotaways, if you will.
Yeah, well, that's true. So at different levels, you can afford different things. Like, I mean, I'm sure there's some companies that have staffers that are, in the office 24/7, 7 days a week. We, from the very beginning, once I found out someone had promoted to me about an answering service, and I'm telling you, I think we had one guy working part-time. This goes way back. And I said, that's a great idea, because I don't want to market and then not get the call that I paid to get,
right,
for some reason. So we did that early on. And so at least we're getting the calls, not to say like your example where the answering service or the person answering is not connected. Maybe they didn't do the best job, right?
Yeah, that happens.
You're getting somebody on the phone at least,
right?
And then follow-ups, trying to plug every possible leak that you can think of. How do you do damage control? Well, if you're calling back 100% of the customers, was our guy, did he do what he said he's going to do? He didn't leave a mess, did he? He didn't, probe them. Are they happy? At least they're getting some personal attention from the office and getting an opportunity to voice any complaints that you might be able to fix before you lose the customer,
Yeah, that makes sense. Cause I mean, I don't I don't run an HVAC company, but I would imagine that a lot of I think this is not even just specific to the HVAC industry, but just running a business in general. Like a lot of the times when there's something going wrong or a customer has a bad experience, like you're going to maybe hear 5 or 10% of those. And a lot of people are just going to say, I'm just never going to call those guys again. And you're not even aware of it.
That's right. I always say to people, I said, you gotta develop statistical thinking. So, I used to work in manufacturing, and, all the way back to, the father of quality, Arthur Deming, I think that was his name. And people in the US wouldn't listen to him. So he went to Japan, but the concept is that if there's a defect on the production line, you check every 10th part. And then if you find something else wrong, then you check every part, whatever the formula is.
Okay.
Yeah. The point is that if something happened, for sure that that's not an isolated case.
Yeah.
It's either a habit, a pattern that you need to get into. You need to drill down and find out what's causing this thing. Just because it happened one time and you blow it off, you say, oh, well, I hope that never happens again.
Yeah.
That's probably not going to be.
Yeah. It's probably happening again.
It's probably
today.
happening
Multiple times.
We live in a statistical world. So everything is percentages and probabilities and yeah. And you have to have a goal. So if business owners, if you say, okay, for business owners that really care, I mean, there are some that don't care.
Oh yeah.
And we've run across them, but for people who really care, it can be very crushing to have some of these problems because you really don't want to let your customers down. Right. Mm-hmm. And so when something happens, you do your best to fix it, reel it back in again. But yeah, we're in a tough business, right?
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. So talk to me about how that changes as you go from, you and one tech to how you scaled up now. Like that's always something that I'm interested in is a set, like, no, like I always, everything's statistical. And I like the way you said that because I always think, is it reasonable to expect in your business that 100% of things are going right? Well, no, everyone knows that's not. So then what is that number? Is it 99? Is it 98? And then getting to my point, like as you scale that 1 or maybe 2%, whatever that number is, again, just rule of big numbers, that can become a lot of problems and a lot of issues, even if it is just like 1%. So as you've scaled, how are you like keeping keeping a pulse on your customer's experience and making sure that they're treated well when things go wrong, things are corrected, training your staff? Like, has that changed over the course of you scaling your business, or is that just something that you just always have you've always looked at the numbers, always approached it that way? And so
no, I mean, I've talked to a lot of different people, and there are so many people that have inspired me and impressed me that I've met along the way or read books about and things like that. So there's a lot of talented people in this business. The people who have gotten to higher levels, you can talk to them. I don't care, educated, uneducated. There's people who came up through the ranks as a technician and they might own a $50 million company now,
wow,
or $100 million company. It's really impressive. But as when we started out, our direct experience is that, when you start out, you can do everything. In fact, this is what I tell people. I said, when we first started out, I did absolutely everything. I got the license. I was sitting at the desk. I was picking up the phone. I was answering it. Someone wanted a quote. I went out. When the guy needed help on Saturday, I was crawled up under there, even though I never did it before, I'm handing them tools and whatever it takes. But
then who else is there to do it?
Yeah. Who else is there to do it? Yeah. And so you're wearing every hat, right? Yeah. But then as you grow a little bit, you're like, oh, my wife is a genius. She started noticing how I was struggling with simple things like doing it. And then she stepped in and she was really good at doing proposals and helping me with that. And then she sort of took that on. So now we had things divided in two, and then we grew a little bit bigger. And then you have another person in the office. Now they're answering the phone, someone's selling, I'm handling certain things. And so I think the goal is to get to a level of specialization where the bigger companies, they have a leads coordinator, they have 5 salespeople, they have a GM, so the organizational structure changes. And all the tasks that need to be done begin to get divided down because one person can't do everything,
Yeah. Yeah, your wife, by the way, helps you tremendously. She's a rock star. So that's
absolutely.
And it just talks to playing to your strengths and I mean, at least in my experience, like it's been a journey just to figure out like what are the things what are my strengths, and I find plenty of things that I'm awful at, and like trying to delegate those, but knowing that you're still ultimately responsible for everything.
Yeah, you got to keep your finger on the pulse.
Yeah.
Somehow you got to sense what's going on. You can't just devoid yourself of everything. I mean, and it's amazing. I mean, I've talked to people. There's people out there. I heard about, one guy, he's got, he might own 20 businesses, right?
Wow.
So
yeah. I've never understood how people do that.
Right. But I think that these people have built an organization on top of the entire system. So they might have a company in this state where they've got the leadership and the technicians and phone answering people and all that. And then they have that everywhere in each of their companies. But then on top of it, they've got some administrative structure built that supports this entire thing, and that's, to me, that's very impressive to be able to build something like that.
Yeah. And build that over time. It's tough. Like there's always that gap in between, like early on when I was joking about who else is there to help. Like you can't really build that structure and like delegate away your weaknesses from day one. But as you grow, I think sometimes it can be tough because, every time you're bringing someone on payroll, there's always consideration. So it's tough to know when is the right time to maybe bring in someone and offload responsibility or tasks. And you've done that, for years and years and years as you've grown your business.
Yeah. Sometimes it takes some courage because just like you're saying, you can't hire a half of a person, right? So you get to a point at which you're like, okay, do I work 20 extra hours, and how long am I going to have to do that before, I've always said that I have an organizational structure dream, so you have a wish list. You say, you have a piece of paper. I tell my son, who's also a business owner, I say, here's your most valuable tool, a blank piece of paper and a pencil, right? Because you can dream with that. It doesn't cost you anything. So a lot of people won't do that, right? So you can actually sit down and say, okay, you might have 2 people in your company, but you could say, oh, I'm going to there's a desk in the back and there's no one sitting at it, but you're like, one day,
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. It honestly, it makes me think of one of the big, like once I finally found a community where I could get some coaching and learn some of those rules of thumb, one of the big first lessons that like hit me right in the face was an exercise where I basically created an org chart for my business. And this was early on. And it was like, your name's probably going to be in most of those circles, but that's okay. It's just understanding kind of these are the different parts of, the business and looking at them that way. So that way, I think it just turns your eyes to the future and even just working on that future focused mindset and abundance mindset of, this is my name's in every one of the circles, or, the desk is empty in the back, but my dream is that if I just keep doing these things every day that I know will grow the business, I'm going to have someone sitting in that chair. I'm going to erase my name from this circle and I'm going to write the new name in there.
That's right.
So I think that's big to have those dreams.
The beginning of everything is desire.
Yeah.
And so that's what people need to understand is that, you having a desire, a dream, a goal, that's where it needs to start. And just because you haven't achieved it yet, you just can't get frustrated. You just got to keep, and the game, the reason, they have all these statistics in business that say, 85% of the business has failed in the first 5 years. And of the ones that survive, 85% or something fail in the next 5 years. But when you're trying to hit a small target, I call it you're a sniper. So if you've got a business and you're in single digit profits, imagine having a, whatever it is, a $2, $3, $5, $10 million business, and you're in single digit profits, and you're trying to make a decision about, hiring and expanding. Well, if you're passing through 95, cents of every dollar that comes through there, that's a real challenge. And even if you're running over double digit profits, you're still facing a challenge, because you just can't be reckless and survive.
Yeah, it doesn't leave a lot of room for error. I mean, when you're that skinny. So
no.
How do you approach profit? I mean, you don't have to give away any kind of trade secrets, anything like that, but that is an important point. And I see that with a lot of industries, HVAC in the marketing world. Sometimes I come across these monster companies and, working on a razor thin profit margin. And you said something interesting early in the podcast, where you were saying that, sometimes that those bigger companies like that, I can't remember exactly what you said, but it was basically, they're either maybe not necessarily as profitable, or have just as many, if not more, issues. And I think so much of that is around profit. So I know some people subscribe to like the profit first mentality, or certain things like that. How are you like thinking about profit as you look into what's now like the new year, as you think into your planning?
Well, the basic philosophy, people have to understand that profit's not bad. You have to have a couple of little mantras. A mantra is that money is for serving people. And so, you can be all proud of the fact that you're not making any money or something, and take it as a badge of honor. But how are you going to serve anybody if you're not making a profit? How are you going to honor a warranty if you don't have reserves? You put yourself into a place where you're subject to temptation, where you're just going to abandon somebody. And if you're in this industry, you've come across these situations where customers have just been abandoned, because summertime comes and they're so busy, and then the phone rings and it's a warranty call. It's like, I've got too many paying calls.
We'll get to that. Yeah. Never.
Yeah. So, but so profitability is really important. And I think that everybody needs to develop some basic mantras about how they think about profitability. And over the years, I've learned a lot of rules of thumb from some really sharp people that have kind of laid out how our business works. I mean, our industry works, as far as margins, and it's changed over the years. It's gotten more competitive, and the percentages have gotten tighter. It used to be, somebody told me this years ago. He says, I met somebody, this has probably been years ago. I met somebody, and he says, oh, you're in the air conditioning business. He says, yeah, man, I remember that back in the day, we could take the price of the equipment and triple it, or whatever rule he used, quadruple it, and then that would be the selling price, and we'd sell them all day long. But as marketing gets, people get marketed to more, and there's more competition. Some of that has to be tightened up, Yeah. Get a bit tighter.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I like that idea of being confident around having a healthy, fair, strong profit margin, and doing that as a way of ultimately serving your customers, because it doesn't enable you to do, like you mentioned, I think the warranty, that's a great slam dunk example there of just just keeping you in a strong position to be able to actually make things right for all your customers. A lot of people have a lot of struggle with profit margin and balancing that. I think we see that a lot with maybe sub million annual, or I don't know what that number would be, but that's probably one of those kind of mindset, or limiting belief kind of ideas that has to break as you grow. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, as far as, sometimes you can get caught in the weeds, so to speak. You're in the details, and details are important. Like, if you are quoting a job and then, you do the job, and then afterwards, it's always been preached to me to do job costing. It's kind of like the analogy of the guy goes to the shooting range and he's shooting whatever distance, I don't know, 100 yards or something like that. So he needs a spotter, right? Because he fires a shot and it's on the paper, and the spotter says, okay, you're 2 inches to the right. Yeah. And so he's got to adjust. Well, job costing is like that. So you had to, if you've never done this job before, you do one, you price it, and then when you're done, you job cost it, and you say, oh, I was off. And so then you make an adjustment, and then pretty soon you're in the black, and pretty soon you're hitting the bullseye. And then, as you're moving through the year, it's always helpful to zoom out. I mean, you can be in there job costing this job, but you also have to be able to zoom out. This is a funny analogy, but we watch movies, right? I think it was an Ocean's movie.
Oh yeah.
And you got that guy Nagel, right? And he's in there, and they're talking to him. Don't leave anything out, run it for me. And they're telling him about this job that they're going to do. And he says, okay, back to macro. So he has the ability to get into a micro set of details, but then zoom back out to the macro view and back and forth. So you can't always you can't always be in the weeds, and you can't always be macro. You have to go in and out,
So how do you make sure that you're doing both? Is there do you have 90-day reviews, or do you are there mechanisms in place to kind of, because I guess for me, I have no problem being in the weeds. It's the zooming out that I tend to struggle with. So what is it? Is that something that you're just that's just your intuition, or do you have a mechanism in place to do that?
We again, none of us, I don't believe, have ever had an original thought, but we've all learned everything from somebody. So whenever I'm talking about this, I'm giving credit to all the people that have told me things that I may not remember who it was that told me. So, but we do productivity reports, and that's kind of a zoom out thing for us too, because, you could do your year. You could say, this is our gross, this is our cost of goods sold, these are our expenses, and here's our profit. That would be the major macro. But what do you do on a daily basis? Well, someone needs to look, how did we do today? How many people do we have? What's our payroll? What's our take? The technicians go out. If you have software, it becomes really easy to do productivity reports, because everybody should know their numbers. They're going out. Of course, you have to give them call. You have to do marketing to get the phone to ring, to give them calls, right? But so once they have the
lots
calls,
of links in the chain.
That's right. Once they have the calls, then what are they able to accomplish with it? And I've always told people that you realize no two things in the world are the same. No two fingerprints are the same, and no two people are the same. And guess what? No two technicians are the same. So you've got top performers, you got mid-range guys, you got your average guys, whatever, but you've got a range of different people who perform differently. But the productivity report will show you. So if you know how many hours they worked, how much money they made, and how much revenue they generated, that tells you a lot. And that's kind of a big picture view that you can look at in 5 minutes. If someone generates the report for you, you can take a look at it, look all down, how many hours did people work, how much money do we bring in, and then you can look at that as an individual, on an individual basis. Mm-hmm. Harry, Larry, whatever.
Yeah, that's a good point, because knowing you, Mark, you are such an analytical, that engineer type. I think people are going to listen to that part right there and go, oh boy, I need to start tracking this and really start breaking my numbers down, just like Mark just said. That's really key. How long have you been? I mean, I know you can do a lot of this, through your CRM. How long have you been tracking at this level? You just always capture that data, or is that something that you've implemented?
No, we went to we went to get some coaching, and then we started learning about these productivity reports. It just made a ton of sense to me to be able to track revenue, gross revenue, gross pay, and then develop a ratio between those. And there's some other philosophies out there too from people that I listen to. I get a lot of emails and things like that. There's one philosophy out there, profit per man hour. and there's a way that you can calculate that. We haven't gotten really to that yet. I mean, I understand the value of it, but the productivity report right now for us is so simple and easy to generate and so revealing, and it just gives us something on a weekly basis that we can have a discussion about. Yeah, and keep it on the rails. If it seems like it's going this way, we can address it, coach people, find out maybe they're having issues at home, or you just don't know.
Well, it kind of goes back to that, customer that has a bad experiences and just decides they're going to just not call back. Like that can happen, within your own business. If you're not aware of changes in productivity, or like you're not measuring that, you don't even have a chance to diagnose it and see, maybe it is something at home that's going on, or maybe it's something that can be fixed quite easily. But if you're not tracking it and you're just shooting from the hip, it makes that a lot more challenging.
Yeah, there's a lot of challenges. I mean, the world is, I always say that the world is full of fine lines. We're walking a lot of fine lines. The road to success is narrow.
Yeah.
The path to destruction is wide, right?
Yeah, I like that. Boy, that cuts to the bone.
Yeah. All the way down.
Man.
Because you want people to be productive. But the fine line is, if you press them, but you don't want them ripping a customer off. You don't want them telling the customer that this is wrong when that's not in fact wrong. You don't want them to overcharge. You don't want them to undercharge. You want them to be productive and profitable, but you don't want them to be dishonest to do it.
Right.
So that's a fine line.
Yeah.
That's a problem that a lot of companies have had with incentive systems. Incentive systems are awesome. And I've talked to so many people that said this was the key to them moving forward. I talked to one company owner a few years back who's way down in Florida somewhere. I don't know where right now, but it's been so long. But he said that he was stuck. And when he put an incentive system in place and started incentivizing the people, things really started to move.
Interesting, yeah.
But I've also heard people say that their incentive system, they had to watchdog it because people were so motivated for the income that in a lot of cases, things weren't, the customer wasn't being treated right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were going to make it happen no matter what. They weren't going to let the customer get in the way.
Yeah. So
interesting.
that's the fine line.
That's tough because, I mean, of course, as the owner, when you own a business, it's your name, it's your reputation, and no one cares more than the owner. I mean, I personally believe that to be true. And I think always will be. I think people, your staff can get close. They can get to maybe 95% or, talking about numbers, but how do you try to make that a part of your culture? So maybe you either intentionally are or not using incentive programs or developing those in a right way, but like how do you make that a part of the culture so that people are being productive and, business is moving forward, but doing it in a fair, ethical way, treating your customers the right way?
Well, I think that you can, first of all, you can preach it right to the people in meetings and things like that. But then, people see your behavior, how, when something goes wrong, how does this customer get treated? And culture, I'm not a corporate expert. You can read books on culture and everything like that. But I think that culture is almost analogous to nature, your nature, so culture is going to take time to develop, but once you develop it, I think it comes from the leadership and the owners. So how did that customer get treated? And everybody sees that. And then over a period of time, they come to expect this is what's going to happen if this happens. This is what they'll do. They being the owners and the leadership.
Yeah, I think that's very true. It's interesting to see different cultures across different businesses, and it's like a thumbprint almost to the owner or usually it's I was going to say the leadership team in certain cases, but really it's that owner, whoever's in charge. Like it's almost funny to me how like I'll kind of get to know an owner maybe, and then like the whole team is just like, and that's like with great power comes great responsibility. Like if you're good, ethical, person, and that like that trickles down, and there's can be a ton of success there. But it's almost like you decide to start a business and grow a team, and you kind of like let the whole world know kind of who you are, because your whole team's going to reflect you to your customers.
Yeah.
So so that's fair. Top down.
It's a challenge because when people are, there's this thing called temptation, but it's like you almost don't want to know too many details. If things are going really well and you're rolling wheelbarrows full of money down to the bank, I'm joking, but
yeah, for sure.
It's like, we don't want to know anything that's going to slow this down. Right.
Right.
So that's where the character comes in.
Right. Like maybe we take a peek under the hood and just check. Yeah. No, I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, so let's touch a little bit on, so we talked, about kind of the early years and getting your start and culture and leadership. And so you've seen great success. You talked about kind of lead flow and where you are today. What are some of the things, like you're doing a lot of really creative things from my perspective, out of the box thinking to really be super successful in a time where I know a lot of HVAC companies have been struggling over the last 12, 18 months, let's say, due to many reasons. But what are you doing that's really making that phone ring and giving you consistency? You're doing a lot of different things, but
specifically like marketing things. Yeah. Okay. Well, you've really helped us a lot. You're working on the SEO, and then you made a suggestion to us about the text message blasting, and we scrubbed our database some, and that has really worked well for us. And then, we're dabbling in the LSA, and I think we're finally getting to the point where we may be interested in increasing the budget for that. So that's kind of, you're working on all the digital side for us.
Yeah.
And then we have another company that is doing an email newsletter, and they're doing social media. And so we're ramping up with them, working through some problems, learning how to, how much of the content are they doing? What are they expecting of us? And we're having that's a little bit of a struggle, because people in the office, I don't have time to do this. I don't have time. And then we have to get back. So it's all communication, that we're trying to, but that's good, because now they're responsible for this sort of thing. And then we also do some direct mail, which is very targeted, and it can be done randomly. So in other words, your lead flow slows down. I can make a phone call. Okay, here's zip codes. We want to send some, we want to do a coupon, send some mailers to this area or this area. And so that's something that we can turn on and turn off very easily, and then of course, trying to plug holes in the bucket, we're doing follow-up phone calls. We've hired a temporary person to really be responsible for that. And letting people know, like if the technician, we could tell everybody in the company, say, we want everybody to let the customers know all the things we do. But then the technician goes and he gets busy and he leaves and he doesn't close the call and give them the whole marketing pitch, So then the follow-up person does it. So then they're the next person in line who says, oh, hey, Mrs. Jones, did we do really good over there? I just want to let you know that we also do this and this and this.
Yeah.
These other
so to be clear, you're saying not only following up like missed calls, following up completed, successful jobs and doing like a quality just touch base, right?
Yeah,
just for our listeners, like
my goal would be
you're going the extra mile. I don't want people to be confused thinking that,
No, I'm saying my goal would be to 100% call every single person that we've been to. Like if we go to them, call them the next week. Next week, everybody gets a call, you know, and and while we're on the phone with them, we're letting them know we're doing the cross marketing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Or any other services that we provide, you know?
Yeah. And I know I'm like a broken record saying this, but the HVAC companies like you that are very successful, I think, do a really good job of bringing in new customers every single day, and then also getting tremendous lifetime value from that list. So it's like you keep adding to the stack, and then you keep making each one of those names more valuable by cross-selling them, by retaining them with that phone call. And you know, I'm just thinking as an HVAC customer, as I shared now, I'm having, you know, our rental property and our house, my poor heat pump is like struggling to keep us, you know, keep the that's why I'm wearing my quarter zip right now.
Yeah.
But the thought of, you know, me getting a call back and just like, man, that it's important to stand out to consumers. And in the age of, you know, Amazon same day delivery. And I think it's important to think outside of the HVAC industry and think about how are other companies treating your same customers? Like the same customer that maybe it took 2 days to call back this morning ordered a MacBook on Amazon and it got delivered the same day. And so it's hard to match that in certain cases, but when the customer service and follow-up and follow-through can be ratcheted up, you can stand out more compared to, you know, other competitors in your service area that are doing things the same way that they were doing 2, 5, 10, 20, 30 years ago, which I don't know. I'll get off my soapbox, Mark, but no, I think that's where I really resonate with what you're doing and the way that you approach it. Cause quite frankly, I couldn't agree more.
Well, you're right, because before we started the business, when Mary and I were saying, you know, I think there's a market for the service, for a service business in our area, because we're like, whenever we needed somebody, we're calling somebody, and then, you know, it goes to an answering machine, and then 8:00 at night, the owner operator's calling you back. I mean, he's a diligent guy, right?
Yeah.
But that was the pattern. And I was like, that just doesn't seem right. Nowadays, the pace is ramped way up. And, you know, for a lot of business owners that may be listening to this, they're in my size range or smaller. It's also intimidating to be in a market where you might have 10 or 15 people or 3 people, and there's 50, 100, 150 person companies marketing in your area. So there's a lot of competition in this business, you know? And so that's the market we're in.
But I think that's good encouragement, because everyone has a slot in the market, because even the experience I shared calling, you know, I'll just say top 2 biggest company in Cincinnati, you know, monster group, you know, like first time I had ever called and didn't have a good experience, and ended up going with a company that's probably, I don't know, a third of their size, but they got that opportunity because of, you know, a bad experience that I had, and they got the fundamentals right. Like I found them, well, you know, I'm very scientific about how I'm going to find an HVAC company because of my line of work, but you know, I find them on, you know, the Google map results, and they have solid reviews, not 10,000, but, you know, a couple hundred reviews, and I can, you know, so they're investing and showing up, and it's a company that's kind of that right size that, you know, is going to treat me right, but they're also available to come out, and they own the business. And, you know, they're, like I said, maybe a third of the big guy, but, and they're going to have a customer for life, you know?
Yeah.
So, I think that's super important. Well, kind of to close out here, Mark, what I always like to ask, what advice would you give to that HVAC owner that's trying to take their business to the next level? And I know that's a purposely generic question, but maybe they're like you were early on, like just getting started. Maybe they're trying to crack $1 million or 5 million or 10 million or whatever that number is. I don't know, do you have, what advice would you have for someone that's really just trying to break through in this space?
Well, I think that everybody has a different personality. So I think that you have to search yourself, and, like there's tons of books. There's like, there's a book, Start with Why, or, so what is your reason? I heard one consultant that I was listening to say that, you're not obligated to grow except at the inflation rate. Some people, and then you could take a business and divide it into, is it a legacy business? Is it just one that you're just relying on to provide income for yourself? Or, there's, are you building to sell, or what is it that you're trying to do? And I think sometimes we get caught up, if there's business owners listening to this, sometimes you get caught up in trying to do what somebody else has done, or you feel lesser because you're 1 million and somebody else is 2 million, but I would say my advice would be, don't get hung up on that, and search your own heart and try to figure out, okay, what is my next goal? What am I trying to achieve, and why am I trying to achieve it? So that you don't get, you always have, there's people out there. I don't want to, how do I say it? It's ego driven. I want to have a business of this size, and I don't care if it's 3% profit. It's the size that I'm after. Right. And some other people are like, I don't care what size it is. I want to be in the sweet spot of this thing to where it's working good, or somebody else might want time, let me get the thing to where I can be on the fringes of it and have a little bit more freedom. So I think it's really important to know why you're doing what you're doing, because then you can not be distracted by, be tempted by other reasons for doing what somebody else maybe has done that you're not really looking to do,
That's perfect. I knew I could count on you for a perfect ending, because boy, that's, I think a lot of people miss that, myself included. This is something I've been thinking about a lot recently, and I'm finding that the closer you can, or the better you can understand your why, it gives those goals so much more meaning. It gives me a ton of motivation to go, okay, this is really what I'm after. It's not, XYZ revenue or this thing. It's like, this is why I'm doing it. It's for my wife. It's for, to start a family. It's to provide. It's whatever that goal is, but really being clear on that. That's excellent advice.
And we're in a training ground, right? So one of the purposes of your business is, change. You changing is a good thing, but that's one of the things that makes consulting tough, because you talk to a consultant, and that person who's consulting you might be like a mega people person, and they might tell you a story about how they grew their business by doing all kinds of great things and spending time with people and and your personality is not quite like that. You might have to hire that function. And so they might be giving you advice to do something that's really so far outside of your comfort zone. And that's what makes it tough for consultants, because they could sit there and tell a business owner what to do, but the business owner is going to only grab this and this and this, and maybe they need to go through some personal changes to be able to implement some of the other things. It's a personality driven thing.
Yeah. We joke, or at least I joke in my space, because we're always talking real technical and building backlinks and metadata and all sorts of things. But my joke is that the most technical aspect of our work is people. Like, it's understanding people, and that's the technical work. The other stuff, that's easy. That's not technical. The people stuff is technical, ourselves included. So I think you made a good point on that. So
there used to be a saying I heard in one business, is that the business is simple, people are complicated.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the people oftentimes are the business. So that's
right.
It's that tricky.
That's
we
right.
can just get rid of the. No, I'm just teasing. So good stuff.
You gotta have people. If you're going to accomplish something, you gotta have people.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense. Well, Mark, thanks so much So many nuggets of wisdom in here for all walks of people in this industry. And I think it just goes to show that it's a long game, and do things the right way, and you'll find the reward on the other end. So
absolutely.
So
great.
Awesome.
Thank you, Alex, for hosting me.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the HVAC Heroes podcast. If you would like to book more jobs and generate higher revenue for the dollars you're putting into marketing, please visit hvacmarketers.com and check out the resources tab, where we offer free trainings on everything from how to run profitable Google ads to how to get in the map pack in your service area, text message marketing, and much, much more. Also, feel free to shoot us a chat with your specific questions. We're here to help you grow your HVAC business. Thanks for listening.